Welcome to the first class of PSM-RM guidance tool. I'll show you how we use our tool for training purposes. In this case, we're going to go through the process safety culture element. First, I want to tell you what is Process Safety Management Roadmap Tool, or PSM-RM. It's a disciplined and consistent element-by-element access to the complete risk-based process safety management process expectation guidance. Basically, this will show you what we expect to have in place for each element on the risk-based process safety management system. Here is something that Paul Reed says about our tool is anyone who wants to implement, review, or train people on process safety management but don't know where to start, PSM-RM works like crazy. Thanks, Paul, and you will see how it works. Welcome to the class number 1, and we will go through the case of management dilemma and see how we can use PSM-RM to tackle certain things from the training point of view. The management dilemma is something that many people know. If you don't know, you will know, and you will see your aha moment now, because it's what happened on every company that is having this dilemma. Production or protection, safety or production. It's always a dilemma. That's why we always try to find this balance. However, it's one of the most difficult things to do, and many companies are facing some problems on this. Basically, what happened is in the management dilemma, we have, if you go too much on production, you start relaxing protection, and that is when we have the major accidents to happen. Or if you go too much on protection or safety or things like that, basically, in many cases, we stop the activity and we cannot produce properly. And in that case, of course, we are losing money and the business go down. That is not really possible to happen. Now, what happened, or what is the proper way to have that balance? What we call the dynamic safety culture balance. You need to have the safety culture in your place to achieve the balance, because it's a mix of different things. And we will go through that just now. You need to have enough resources for your protection, but at the same time, you need to have the right resources for your production. Of course, in a safe manner. That's why safety culture is the element that we use to have that dynamic balance on your management dilemma. Okay, now how we apply PSM-RM for this particular topic. Basically what we do, I will just go out of the presentation, I will show you, is what process safety management roadmap is telling us to have in place. First, you will have, just let me move a little bit here. I'm assuming that you went through already the gap analysis. The PSM-RM is divided in three main elements, I would say. You have a roadmap with expectations and everything that you're supposed to have in place. You will have a gap analysis tool where you need to see where you are sitting based on the requirements from the process safety culture point of view. There are different topics. I will assume that you went through this already, and we will jump to element number 1. Element number 1 is basically process safety culture. Process safety culture is one element from the main, let's say, foundational block that is part of the commit to process safety. That is basically based on this. These are the pillars, foundational blocks. Commit to process safety, understand hazard and risk, manage risk, and learn from experience. And we have the elements. In this case, we are tackling the first element, that is basically the process safety culture. Okay, here the working sheets from our tool are divided in different things. And it's important for you to know, because it's basically the same structure for all the 20 elements. That's why in this particular case, process safety culture, we have the key principles that are three key principles that basically are: maintain a dependable practice. It's very important. We need to have certain things in place to keep that practice dependable. Cannot be something on-off, or the typical thing that happen all over the place that usually are the campaigns. That is something that you just switch on because something happened and then just die and nothing else is happening. In that case, we need to maintain a dependable practice. The second element basically is develop and implement a sound culture. In this particular one, that's why we say key principle is we need to develop a sound culture. And the third element is basically monitor and guide the culture. We need to measure what's happening. We need to see where we need to improve or not. Okay, now for this particular one, I will use two examples. One example is in the essential features, provide strong leadership. The work activity is asking me to educate managers in process safety culture, vision, expectation, roles and responsibilities, and standards. That means that if I go back to the presentation and I go back to the next step, how we apply it, we need to educate our managers. We need to have that education, that competence development, that training, things like that. And now just wait for me a few seconds and I will show you why this is so important. I'm just grabbing this element on purpose because it's one of the main failures that we are facing in the industry. Okay, the essential features are providing a strong leadership, work activities is telling me in this particular case, educate managers in process safety culture, vision, expectation, roles, responsibilities, and standards. Now we have the element metrics, how to measure that kind of things that we have in place, and then ways to improve the effectiveness. That can be an extra practice that you can put in place. And the most important part is management review, how we or how your management's supposed to use this tool to see what they're supposed to see or what they're supposed to measure, I would say. Okay, now I'm taking this one and then I'm just using another one, exercise that you can do here with the people that you are training is some sort of game-based learning process. Is now that we have the element number one, we can play a little bit and trying to identify extra elements that are linked to this requirement. For example, in this case, educate managers is part of training, is part of competence. Okay, let's go to the element related to competence and see what is required. That can be just an example. Okay, the second thing that I'm using here is 27. And the 27 essential features, 27 basically what it's telling me is this. 27 is saying the essential feature is ensure open and effective communication. And then the work activity is telling me establish a system to ensuring that management is accessible to the workforce for reporting potential hazards and providing input on operational safety management policy, issues, and needs. Why I'm grabbing this, I'll show you just a few seconds. That's why, okay, this can be just a couple of examples. We need to educate our management and we need to have that system that is basically open communication. Okay, now we know what we need in place. We went through the gap analysis, we went through the elements. Now we know what the process is asking us to have in place. Doesn't really matter the format because basically it's a framework and you can move inside of that framework, but you need to have that in place. Now, why I'm mentioning these kind of things? Because at the moment, for training purposes, what you can use, unfortunately, we have many bad experience of something that we're supposed to have in place, but finally we didn't. And I'll show you one of the most famous lessons learned. And you will see how this is linked one and each other. Now, going to the, let's say, competence of our management, see this finding from the Gulf of Mexico oil well blowout. To understand how this operated, we must first make the distinction between occupational safety, something called personal safety, on the one hand, and process safety on the other hand. That understanding between the difference between occupational safety and process safety is key because otherwise you are looking the wrong things. And that is a finding that you can go to the management workaround lesson from the Gulf of Mexico well blowout, and you see that the competence of that management visit was not properly done. That can be a finding. You have the requirement from the PSMRM, but you know already, and you can share with your people what basically went wrong and how to learn from that to avoid that reoccurrence in your company, in your organizations, for your clients, or any kind of service you are providing or any kind of job you are having. Now, second thing, open communication. Look at this finding. BP Texas City, that's a different event, different incident. This was 2011, and this one was 2005. Basically, Texas City, the report went out in 2007, but this incident is 2005. BP Texas City lacked a reporting and learning culture. Personnel were not encouraged to report safety problems, and some fear retaliation for doing so. The lessons from the incident and near misses, therefore, were generally not captured or acted up. Guys, this is exactly what is happening. PSMRM is asking us to have certain work activities in place that is basically giving us some deliverables. But in this case, we are learning that two of the main incidents in our industry were failing on that requirement. And that is exactly the lesson learned to avoid recurrence. This is one class where you can see how one element is bringing you a lot of, let's say, connections on what we're supposed to have in place, how we can do it, and how we can learn from people or companies, organizations, or any kind of, let's say, management system didn't, basically, and happened what happened. That was one of the huge major accidents that we face in the industry in the last 20 years. That's why it's important for you to see the connection. Just to recap a little bit, how to apply PSMRM. Basically, PSMRM is telling us a certain number of activities. We have a structure that we follow. As I mentioned before, we have key principles, essential features, work activities, how to measure that, element metrics, ways to improve effectiveness, and management review. Anyways, it's like having different parties in that process. And then based on this activity we can play a little bit, we can do some role-based exercise, we can do some game-based learning and start connecting the different elements, see what can be a good deliverable. Because when your people do what is expected to be done, they will learn more about the process because they will be part of that process. That's important. However, we can show them where we failed during these years, where we didn't apply what is expected to be in place. Okay, that is how we use PSMRM for this. In this particular case, speaking about the management dilemma between production and safety, it's important for you to remember this. Workers are as safe as they need to be without being too safe in order to be productive. What I'm trying to say here is that, as we always mention, between what the procedure says and between the action, we have something very important, is our competence, culture, brain, and many other things. We cannot just stop because the procedure is telling us. We need to assess the risk, we need to do the assessment of the situation, and we need to produce, because otherwise the business don't work. Okay, in that case, I'll invite you just to go to www.psm101.com and just visit there, see what PSMRM can do for you. I'm showing all the elements, the different bodies, and really this is one of the tools that will help you a lot on your training about PSM. That's why, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this short and micro class, and number 2 will come soon. Just wait for that, stay tuned and join PSM 101. You can join our academy, you can download PSMRM, anything just to keep developing our competence. I hope that you enjoy the presentation and see you soon. Take care. Bye, guys.